Alrighty, green light is on. Green means go. Oh, we're going to pass around this basket for tithe and offering, and kids are dismissed for kids' church. I think we start. The basket around, just if you've filled out one of those welcome cards, if you can throw that in the basket, or there's a metal bucket in the back that says giving. You can put your welcome cards or prayer request cards in that bucket. So, excellent. Alrighty. How are we doing this morning? We're doing good. So good. Excellent. Well, I'm excited to be here with you guys this morning. Something a little different. For those of you from Alpha, this message might sound a little familiar, but just asking the Lord to reveal new things, right? Because His Word is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, and it's good for so many things. And so, well, I'm excited to be here. And this morning we're going to start with our teaching text. And so we're going to be in Mark chapter 5, verses 21 through 34. So that's our main text for this morning. If you need a Bible and don't have a Bible, there are Bibles back by the sound booth on a cart. You're more than welcome to grab one of those to follow along. And the text will also be up on the screen. So here we go. Mark 5, verses 21 through 34. Jesus got into the boat again and went back to the other side of the lake, where a large crowd gathered around him on the shore. Then a leader of the local synagogue, whose name was Jairus, arrived. When he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet, pleading fervently with him. "My little daughter is dying," he said. "Please come and lay your hands on her. Heal her so she can live." Jesus went with him, and all the people followed, crowding around him. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. She had suffered a great deal from many doctors, and over the years she had spent everything she had to pay them, but she had gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. She had heard about Jesus, so she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his robe, for she thought to herself, "If I can just touch his robe, I will be healed." Immediately, the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body that she had been healed from her terrible condition. Jesus realized at once that healing power had gone out from him. So he turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robe?" His disciples said to him, "Look at the crowd pressing around you. How could you possibly ask who touched me?" But he kept on looking around to see who had done it. Then the frightened woman, trembling at the realization of what had happened to her, came and fell to her knees in front of him and told him what she had done. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over." So hello, like I was introduced, my name is Rachel. I'm one of the leaders here at Water City Church, and I'm really excited that I get to share with you this morning. So along with being a leader at Water City, I serve full-time as a corporate chaplain, and I also work part-time as a missionary with Chi Alpha. We didn't even plan that. That was great. So I head up their leadership development, and I really love what I get to do. But this morning I'd like to start off with a confession, if that's okay. You know, we're all about humility and vulnerability here, and so confessions seem right at church. So my confession is that I sometimes make assumptions. There's this whole kind of like trend happening on social media right now that says we listen and we don't judge. And that's true, but sometimes I forget to turn off my facial subtitles. You know what I mean? Like, I have to try really hard to keep my eyebrows under control and not like, oh, okay. That's my confession. I make assumptions sometimes. I know that I shouldn't. It's a bad habit that I'm trying to break, keep these bad boys under control. And it's, a habit that I'm asking Jesus to help me with. But it's so easy, right? It's so easy to make assumptions about a person, about a situation, to think that we know what's going on when really we don't know what's going on. And you know what they say about assumptions, right? I'm not going to say it because we're in church, but you know. It's so easy, though. And so, for example, you may assume that I'm in my 20s, but I'm actually 34. You may assume that I'm a tea person, but it is in fact black coffee that flows through my veins. You may assume that I like rom-coms, but please give me Star Wars and Lord of the Rings any day of the week. And you may assume that I love to read and to eat Taco Bell and have a big, fat, black cat named Jasper, and you would be correct. So there he is. That's my cat. He has a total of 2 brain cells, and when he combines them, he's a menace to society. But I love him, so he's great. So you may assume that I grew up in a Christian home, and you would be wrong. You see, it's easy to make assumptions instead of letting ourselves be curious about other people. And this is one of my favorite things about Jesus and about the Bible. You see, Jesus shows us how to be curious about others, and the Bible invites us to be curious about God. I mean, take the text that we just read, right? What do we notice and what do we wonder? The older I get, the more I find myself leaning into the mysteries of Scripture. The older I get, the less I feel like I have to know. When I was in high school and first coming to believe in Jesus, and especially when I was in college and in Chi Alpha, I just wanted to know as much as I possibly could about Jesus. I wanted the answers. Because I wanted to know, and knowledge isn't bad. It is great to want to know about our God. But I find myself more and more, and maybe it's just the season I'm in, just leaning into the mysteries of God, leaning into the wonder, and being okay with the not knowing. For example, in the scripture we just read, we don't really know anything about this woman. We don't know her name. We don't know how old she is. We don't know if she's married. We don't know if she has children. We don't know how or when the bleeding started, just that it's been happening for 12 years. We don't know if this woman is a Jew or a Gentile, meaning a non-Jew. And we don't know if she ever tried to hide her condition. We can make assumptions on a few of those, but the text really doesn't tell us. We don't really know a whole lot about this woman, but this is a text that I think a lot of us can be familiar with, that we hear often in church services, especially if we've grown up around church. So what do we know? We know that she is unclean. So I want to give a little context that we'll get from Leviticus 15, 19 through 30. And so what happens, we're going to make the assumption that she started kind of her monthly cycle and that the bleeding never stopped. So in Leviticus 15, there's actually laws about this. And so during a woman's monthly cycle, anything that she touches is unclean. So this cup would then be unclean, this table unclean, this microphone unclean, the cajon unclean, the door handle unclean. Everything she touched, everything she sat on, everything would be unclean. Everything. And then it says, when the woman's bleeding stops, she must count off 7 days. Then she will be ceremonial clean. And then on the 8th day, she must bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons and present them to the priest at the entrance of the tabernacle. The priest will offer one for a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering. And through this process, the priest will purify her before the Lord for the ceremonial impurity caused by her bleeding. And so not only is she unclean for the time that she's bleeding, but then she has to count off 7 days, and then she has to get either 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons if she lives in poverty, bring them to a priest, and then she is clean. This whole process of becoming clean. So we know that this woman is unclean, and we know that everything that she touched is unclean. Now, there are 2 things that come to mind when I think about this, that everything she touched means that it is also unclean. If this woman happens to be married, that means for 12 years not embracing her husband. That means for 12 years not being able to hug or console her children. For 12 years, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year after year after year after year, being unclean. And if she is a good Jew, does she risk causing her children to be unclean, her husband to be unclean, never being able to console an aging parent, never being able to be there or hug or hold the hand of a friend. Always unclean for 12 years. But on the other hand, let's say that she's not married and she doesn't have kids. Man, in this culture, the shame and the unworthiness that would come from being unwed, from having a barren womb for 12 years and knowing that there is nothing you can do about it. Or thinking that maybe you can do something. You can go to doctors. They're supposed to help. But instead, they have taken all of your money and they have made you worse. I can't imagine her shame. I can't imagine her hopelessness. I can't imagine the weakness and the frustration and the deep grieving and sorrow she must feel for 12 years. Scripture says that hope deferred makes the heart sick. I can't imagine how sick her heart must have felt. So we know, one, that she is unclean. Two, we know that she is desperate. She's desperate, right? She's gone to doctors. She's spent all of her money. She has nothing left. She is desperate. And I think so often this is where we can find ourselves, right? We have situations going on in our lives. We have things that we're facing, and we are desperate to make it stop, right? We will do anything to relieve the pain of our situation, because that's the culture we live in, right? You should never feel pain, ever. You should just be happy all of the time. Sunshine and rainbows. That song pops in my head of sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows, right? I feel like that's what our culture tries to sell us, that we would never be in pain, but that just is not our reality. So instead, I think that there are a couple things that we try to do when we're in pain. One is we try to just numb ourselves to it. Had a really hard day with the kids. I don't know what to do. I'm just going to have a few extra glasses of wine. I'm just going to numb out the pain. I'm just going to watch a few more hours of TikTok, or I'm just going to read a few more chapters in my book, anything to just kind of make reality go away. I just want to numb myself out. I don't want to feel, I just want to forget. Whatever it takes, I will do whatever it takes to numb the pain so I just don't have to feel. But on the other hand, the other thing that we can do as a culture is I'm just going to hustle. I'm just going to work more. I'm just going to put more hours in at work. I'm just going to hustle through the pain, because eventually on the end of all of this working, it has to get better, right? So I'm just going to keep going and keep going and keep going and keep hustling. But nothing is ever going to get better if we do those two things. If we just numb out to our circumstances, if we just ignore them, if we just do nothing. Or if we're just working and working and working and working, and then not only will we be in pain, but we will be at burnout. And we'll keep going and keep going and keep going until we have nothing left. I feel that she was desperate, that I will drink whatever, I will take whatever pill, I will do anything to make the pain go away. And I feel like it is so easy to fall into that. Now, there's nothing wrong with watching some YouTube videos or watching some Netflix or reading some books. I love reading. But man, are those the things that we're going to just so we don't have to face the reality of our situations? Are those the things that we are continually running to? Do we find that we're just putting more hours in at work so we don't have to deal with the kids, or we don't have to deal with our spouse, or we don't have to deal with the circumstances that we find ourselves in? It's so easy to slip into this mentality of just a little bit more, just a little bit more, just a little bit more. But then a little bit more turns into our whole lives. And eventually we get to a space where we don't recognize ourselves and we wonder how we got there. So this woman is unclean. She is desperate. But she also has faith. If I could just touch his robe, I will be healed. If I could just get close enough to Jesus. And I don't know what she's heard about Jesus. I would love to know, what were the rumors that she heard about him? What were the things that kind of sparked in her mind that if I could just get close enough to him, I will be healed? I love that. I love that she knows she's unclean. She is desperate. I will do anything. And she has faith that if I could just touch his robe, maybe this will help me. Maybe something will change. I've tried everything else. I will try this now. So what does this text show us about Jesus? It shows us that Jesus is not too busy in one task to stop and help someone else who is hurting. Jesus is not too busy to sit with you in your pain. Jesus is not too busy to bring you comfort. Jesus is not too busy to bring you hope. Jesus is not too busy to bring you peace. Jesus sees you. He sees you, and he is not too busy. He is interruptible, and I love that. Jesus meets us in our desperation and our shame. I think so often we just try to cover up what we're going through, right? We just kind of leave our pain and our burdens at the door. We're just, shiny, happy people. Another song that comes to mind. But right, everything's fine. It's okay. Things are kind of weird right now, or things are kind of hard right now, but it's fine. We're making a way through it. But Jesus meets us in our desperation and our shame. But I think we have to be honest with Jesus about what we're going through. God knows, but there is something that happens when we come to Jesus in vulnerability, and we just let the masks and we let just who we think we're supposed to be fall to the wayside. I often tell our students that God can't heal the person that you're pretending to be, because the person you're pretending to be is fine and has no problems. There's nothing to heal. But when we come to Jesus in our vulnerability, in our desperation, in our frustration, in our anger, whatever emotions we are holding on to, when we bring those to Jesus, when we're honest about what we're feeling and what we're going through, Jesus meets us in those spaces. He doesn't need us to pretend. He knows. And even though we know that he knows, for us to be vulnerable with him, to speak those things out loud, man, I think that communicates to Jesus that we trust him. I trust you to see me in my pain. I trust you to see me in my suffering. And maybe you won't fix it right away, but I know that I can trust you to sit with me in the midst of it. And Jesus is not oblivious to the pain and suffering and the sin of his people. He knows. He knows. And he is so kind, and he is so gentle. A few weeks ago, I shared one of my favorite verses. I'm going to share it again because it's a good one. And we have the time. But Psalm 139, 7 through 12 says, I can never escape from your spirit. I can never get away from your presence. If I go up to heaven, you are there. If I go down to the grave, you are there. If I ride the wings of the morning, if I dwell by the farthest oceans, even there your hand will guide me, and your strength will support me. I could ask the darkness to hide me, and the light around me to become night. But even in darkness, I cannot hide from you. To you the night shines as bright as day. Darkness and fear, or darkness and light, are the same to you. And I love that, because it means that God knows what we're going through, and that when we are in our darkest moments, when we are in a pit that seems inescapable, God is not at the top, arms crossed, foot tapping. Hey, I just need you to be happy. I need you to feel some joy. I need you to get your act together. And then we can have a happy relationship and conversation. No, Jesus is with us in the midst of our mess and our muck and our pain and our sorrow and our anger and our frustration. God is with us in those places. Even in darkness, God is with us in there. And I love that. And I love that Jesus doesn't tell her to make sacrifices in the temple to make her clean. He has made her clean. Yeah. Right? She touches Jesus' robe, and her bleeding has stopped. This is incredible. So what does Jesus do? He doesn't say, okay, now wait 7 days, and then the 8th day, you're going to need to scrounge up some sort of money for pigeons. But you've spent everything already on doctors, but I'm going to just need you to maybe beg and get a few some change for some pigeons, and then you're going to have to go to the priest, and then you're going to have to make these sacrifices, and then you'll be clean. No, Jesus says you are clean. You are whole. He doesn't make her go back and do all the things to make her ceremonial clean. He says, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over. Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over. He has made her clean. Right? There's not all these rituals. There's not all these things that she then needs to do to work her way into being clean, work her way into being satisfactory before the Lord. He has made her clean. And it is only Jesus. It is only Jesus who can make us clean. There is nothing that you have done that makes God love you any less, but there is nothing that you can do to make God love you anymore. That is a beautiful mystery of the gospel of Jesus that my brain will just never fully comprehend. God's love is so much bigger than I feel like my little brain has capacity for. I feel like when I try to figure that out, when I try to reason it out why that makes sense, I'm like my cat Jasper, and my two brain cells are just I stall out a little bit. As it's so immense. The grace and mercy and the forgiveness and the kindness and the hope and the holiness of our God is more than I could possibly comprehend, and it is so much more than I could ever deserve. And yet God gives, daily gives, all that he has to us. Now, I don't want to make the assumption that you all have surrendered your life to Jesus just because you are sitting in this room this morning. I don't know where you are in your journey with Jesus, but all I can tell you is that Jesus is worth it. In my own life, there have been so many times where I have seen just the goodness of God over and over and over and over again. I know I've shared a little bit of my story before, but I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I grew up kind of in the mindset of I just have to work and be really good and be the best at everything. So I wanted the lead in the school play. I wanted to be first chair, clarinet, and band. I was super not into sports as a kid, so I have no sports analogy for this. But I would have wanted to be first. I did take fourth in a golf tournament, though, when I was 13 years old, so there's that. A little trophy, and they spelled my name wrong on it. That has nothing to do with this story. Okay. But I grew up in a home where I just wanted to prove that I was good enough. I just wanted to prove that I was something of worth, that I had value, and so I worked, had the 4.0 or close to a 4.0, just anything to show that I was of value. Man, and that just wasn't enough. There was something that was always missing. And so then I began drinking, and I began doing the things that my friends were doing, and got involved in relationships I shouldn't have gotten involved in. And I was just searching to feel like I was enough. And in middle school, I met this girl, her name is Susie, and she went to youth group. And I thought that she was the bee's knees. I really wanted Susie to be my friend. She was just the coolest person to me, and she had this little wiener dog named Lily, and I also wanted access to the dog because the dog was super cute. Anyways, so I thought in my little middle school brain that if I go to youth group with Susie, Susie will be friends with me. And so I started going to youth group with Susie. And I'll be honest, I went for years to youth group. I'm now friends with my youth pastor. He's now the lead pastor of that church. And he knows this, so it's okay for me to say, but I just thought everything he said was just garbage. Okay, you guys believe in a sky fairy, and if I just want something bad enough, you'll give it to me. That seems weird. No thank you. But everyone at youth group was so nice. There was free food. There was always a game. It was a lot of fun. More people to meet, super extrovert over here. People, I'm there. Man, and it got me out of the house for a night. Because you see, when I would go home, that's where the hopelessness set in. Alone in my room in the darkness, it was just worthlessness that was waiting for me at home. It was suffocating darkness that I didn't know how to escape, and I didn't know how to ask for help. But youth group was really a haven for me. And I just need to give a shout out to Susie's parents real quick. They picked me up every Wednesday, dropped me off every Wednesday night. They picked me up every Sunday morning, brought me home every Sunday afternoon, because they knew that my parents were never going to take me to church. My parents were never going to do that. And so they picked me up, and my house wasn't necessarily on the way. It was actually a little bit out of the way, but twice a week, every week, for years and years and years and years, Susie and her parents showed me kindness that I had never experienced before. You guys, what you share with your friends and the invitations that you extend, they matter. And for parents, man, making that extra effort so your friend's friend or your kid's friend can come to church, man, it matters. It makes a big difference. Because when finally I was a sophomore in high school, it was a normal, everyday youth group. Kind of like this, well, except we're adults. Anyways, sorry. It was just an everyday Wednesday night service. There was nothing super special. There was no like special, message or special worship team or anything like that. But during the time of worship, I had just had enough. I don't know if any of you have been there, but I had just had enough, where I just came before God in a moment of desperation. And to be honest, prior to this, I must have prayed the sinner's prayer like hundreds of times, because that's how they did communion at their church, was you prayed the sinner's prayer, then took communion. And so that's what I did. And, but it didn't really like mean anything. Like the goodness of God never pierced my heart before then. And I had this moment where I came before God and I gave God an ultimatum, as one does. And I said, God, you are either real and everything these people say you are. You can save me from this hopelessness. You can save me from this darkness. You can provide hope and peace, and you can wash away the things that make me feel dirty and like I can't come before you. God, you are either everything these people say you are, or you're a fake and a fraud. I just can't do this. Like, I can't live life anymore. And it was the first time and one of the only times I felt God like audibly say to my heart, Rachel, my daughter, I've been reaching down to you the whole time. You just need to reach back up to me. And it was just, I talk about this often, but a God cry, right? Tear snot floor, just waves of emotion, because I could not believe that the God of the universe, the God who is almighty, who is holy, who is righteous, who is merciful, that he would come into my muck and my mess and my dirty soul, and that he would make me clean. It is only Jesus who makes us well. It is only Jesus who makes us clean. No amount of Christian TikToker influencers, no amount of YouTubers, no amount of reading self-help books, none of that will make you clean. Only Jesus. Only Jesus has the power to clean our souls. Only Jesus. It is only Jesus. When all the things we do to escape the pain of our lives fail or fall short, it is only Jesus who can help us. But will we be honest with Jesus? Will we come to him in our desperation? I don't believe in Jesus because he is something to be used to give me a gold star, to make my life just happy and shiny and better, but because I am captivated by his beauty in what he has already done for me. That is the beauty of the gospel. That my God would love me so much that he would send his son to hang on a cross and die the death that I was deserving of. And that he would raise again from the dead so that I could have eternal life. So that this life is no longer all that there is, but there is life beyond the grave. That is the greatest hope. That this life, this temporary flesh and blood life, is not all that there is. There is hope beyond this life. And man, when circumstances get hard, I just had like the worst day of work ever this week. Like heavy, heavy, heavy stuff. I felt faced with the worst of humanity. I don't have words to describe it. And Friday, I just needed to come to Jesus and cry. Just bawl in my living room on the floor, cry to Jesus, and say, Lord, I don't understand this. I don't understand how can there is so much evil and so much suffering. God, I don't understand. But I was reminded, but yet, God, you are good, and you are working in the circumstances, even when I can't see it. And Lord, there is hope for a future. There is so much hope to be had, because the circumstances that we find ourselves in, this is not it. This is not forever. This is not the end game. The end game is eternity with Jesus. Amen. The end game is eternity before the throne of God. And again, my little human brain can't even comprehend the goodness and the joy and the peace and the hope of what that is going to be like. But I know that it is going to be good. So God sees you in your suffering. God sees the things that you're going through. He sees it and he knows. And yes, there is hope and there is healing right now on this side of eternity. But this side of eternity is not all that there is. There is more to see. There is more to experience. Come and see that the Lord is good, as he is good. So I want to end with 2 questions. And Art and the team can come on up. So my 2 questions are, where in your life are you desperate for a touch of God? Where in your life do you want to see Jesus move? Where in your life do you need to see Jesus move? Where are you desperate for him? Where do you want to see him? Where do you need to know that he's working and that he sees you? And my students, they often hear me pray or ask, like, Lord, I want to want you more. And I want to want you more, because right now I feel like I can do it all on my own. I've got a self-help book that's going to help me make checklists and make my life a little easier. I'm reading this book over here, and, that's going to help me with this. But God, I want to want you more, because I need the reminder that yes, books can be helpful. Yes, counselors are amazing. Yes, I want to do well and work hard and give you honor at my job. But God, it is only you who is going to heal the deepest parts of me. God, it is you that brings the miracles. God, it is you that does the impossible. I can't do the impossible, but God, you can. I want to want you more. And God, I want to ask for big prayers, not just little prayers that I could probably just figure out on my own, but God, the big prayers. I want to see you move in ways that are indescribable. Only you, God, that you would get the glory. So where in your life are you desperate for a touch of God? And my second question is, where are you desperate for someone else to come to Jesus? Are you desperate on behalf of another person? I so often think of my own family, and I want them to know Jesus. I want them to know the goodness of God. I want them to know that this life isn't all that there is, that there is so much more hope and peace and joy and glad. There is just so much more for them. Man, I am desperate for them to come and know Jesus. Is there a coworker? Is there a friend? Is there a family member? Is there a neighbor? Man, who are you desperate on behalf of to come and know Jesus? And how are you praying for them? How are you interacting with them? How are you inviting them? Man, I'm so thankful that Susie's parents were desperate for me to come to know Jesus, that they were willing to make that trek to my parents' house twice a week so that I could come and taste that the Lord is good. So where in our lives are we desperate for a touch of God? And where are we desperate for someone else to come to know Jesus? Jesus says that we are the salt of the earth. We are the light of the world. We are the ones to go and tell of the goodness of God. But would we be willing to go? Would we be willing to tell? Because Jesus delights in using us in building his kingdom here. Man, and that is such an honor and such a privilege to be used by God for his good purposes. Man, it fills my heart with gladness and joy. And again, mystery of, Lord, you know me, you know my past, You know all the ways that I still mess up. And yet, God, you say, I want to use you. I want to use him. I want to use her to introduce myself to someone who needs hope, who needs peace, who needs joy, because they're getting really tired and exhausted of trying to do it all out on their own. So we're going to go into a time of communion. So here at Water City Church, we practice